All right, good afternoon to everyone. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So, last week we would have started basically chapter 10, whereby we're looking at how to create a program. So, we're finished with creating the pseudocode, we're finished with creating the trace table, the problem statement. So, we are at our final step of the SBA, which is basically creating a program. We skipped a lot of the content so that we can get to the practical part of it. So that's chapter 10.2 we would have jumped to last week. So we looked at this structure here. So let me open the program and that file side by side. So if you guys can remember the structure, so the first step in creating a program is to have the word program, the keyword program at the very beginning. So notice in the example, you have the keyword program followed by a title. So notice the title here. So that's the first part of each and every program, Pascal program that is. Now, secondly, we would have looked at how to create a comment. A comment is created by putting whatever you want to put as a comment inside of curly brackets. So if at any point in time maybe something is not working in your program, check to see if it is in curly brackets, because basically when something is in curly brackets, it does not function as part of the program. It's basically a comment, just like how in Microsoft Word, they are comments. They're not part of the Word document, but they are there to give additional information. Similarly, if any one of these lines of code were to be placed in a comment, they will no longer function as part of the program. So that might be an exam question. They might put something inside of curly brackets and they might ask you why is the program not working or what is the problem with the program, something of the sort. So just remember that whatever is in a curly bracket is a comment, and a comment is basically just information. It's not part of the overall program. It doesn't carry out any action. Then three, using the word begin to indicate the start of the body. This is where all your statements are going to start from, the input, the output, the process, and so on. One of the most common keyword statements is the write line and write, and there is also read and read line. We have covered that last week, how to use them. They are used for inputs and output. So write and write line are used for outputs. Read and read line are used for inputs. And then the keyword end is always used in line with the begin to indicate that's the end of the body, that's the end of the program. So anything beyond that now will not be part of the program in essence. So it goes from begin to end. And note it's a begin, it's an end with a full stop, with a period. So that's some of the things we would have covered last week. We would have created a simple program. I just send this file here so that you guys can make use of it. So remember I said program followed by the title, that's the very first step. Semicolon. Please remember semicolon indicates the end of a statement. So It's basically the end of a sentence. In our case, end of a line of code. See, you can notice at the end, we would usually put a semicolon to indicate that line of code ends there, that action ends there. var is used to declare your variables. Const is used for creating constants. After the begin is where you are going to initialize your variables, like this here. And then you can put your necessary keywords, your input, your output, your read, and whatever you need to carry out whatever action. Any questions before we start today? All right. So let's move on to let's move on to the if statements. How do we implement the if then and the if then else statements? So we're going to use this same program I sent you. So we are going to compile it and run it to see how it is running firstly before we go ahead. So please enter the first number. So remember, it's a simple program to add three numbers together. So I'm going to enter 30. Please enter the second number, 40. Please enter the third number, 60. The result is 100. Now, that's the end of the program. Nothing else is a part of the program. So the program stops running. If you notice in the status bar at the bottom here, it says end of program reached. So that's the end of the program. Now what we're going to do, we're going to implement the if. So this is the structure here of implementing the if. So what we're going to do, right after the result is, whatever is the result, we are going to run an if on the result. So for instance, so that's going to be right after this right line here, right line, the result is, and that variable, so that's this line here in the output. So I'm going to go to the next line, and you guys can start adding the same if in your program also. So if, open brackets, the variable result is greater than 100, close brackets, then right line, result is greater than 100, quotation mark, close brackets, else, right line, result is not greater than 100. And here we're going to close brackets, we're going to put our semicolon. And notice we wrote all of this here until at the bottom here we placed our semicolon. The reason for that, because this here is the end of the statement. This line here, the else line, is the end of the if statement. It's a very lengthy line, a very lengthy statement. So that's why I said semicolon is the end of a statement, not the end of a line. It's basically the end of the statement, and the statement can have different structure, basically. Good, so this is the basic if statement here, and we're going to see this appearing on the screen. So let's see. Now I want also a line of space between the result is and my output. But let me see the output first before we go to that. Let's focus on this if first before I confuse you. So compile, run. I don't have any errors. So it says waiting for input. So enter the first number, 40, 40, 40. The result is 120. The result is greater than 100. If I try it again, 20, 20, 20, the result is 60. The result is not greater than 100. So this is a simple if statement being added to our program. So can you guys add this to your program? And let me know if you get it to work. You can let me know if you're having any problems also.
Yes, sir, it worked for me.
Great.
It worked, sir.
Great.
It worked, sir.
Great. Great. Good. So really just great. So that's a simple implementation of the if function. Now, as I was saying, we want some presentation. So let's look at some presentation of this program here. So notice the information is relatively neat in that each is going in its own line, but maybe we want some space, like between certain groupings of lines. Like for instance, maybe right after the result is 60, I want some space, a line of space between that and the result is not greater than 100. So what we can do, um, right between those two lines of code, we basically put this here, right line, open bracket, two single quotation mark. Notice it's not a double quotation mark. It's still the single quotation mark. But this is the pattern of code that you can use anywhere you want a line of space. So you just copy this here and place it wherever. So I'm going to copy it. I'm also going to place it right after accepting number 1. I'm going to put it right after accepting number 2, right after accepting number 3. And yeah, so that should give me some lines of space within my program. So if I compile this here now and run, please enter the first number, 40. I notice I have some space there. Second number, notice I have space again. Third number, I have some space there also. It might be a bit spaced out, but I'm just showing you how you can space out your information, your output, if you do need that for your presentation. So try to add it in and let me know if you get it to work.
So it worked for me.
Great.
It worked, sir.
Great. Ameline and Stephanie.
Sir, mine only did the space for the result is and not like the first part.
Yeah, because you gotta add it to wherever else you want the space. So you gotta scroll up and paste it, copy it first, and then paste it
Oh,
else. So basically, where you want the space, you paste that line of code.
sir, when I click on compile,
Mm-hmm.
it it's saying unknown identifier before write-in. Well, highlighting right line.
All right. Did you spell right line correctly? Did you put two single quotation mark, not a double quotation mark?
Yeah,
You got a semicolon before.
yeah,
Still the same thing. So it looking exactly like this here.
yeah. Send you a screenshot.
Yeah.
Pictures.
Yeah, you can send one. All right, so unknown identifier is a LN, not a I. L, not I. So unknown identifier means it's not identifying the word you would have typed. So you type the word incorrectly.
Yeah, it worked now.
Hard good. Good. Now, what are we going to look at next? Now we're going to look at, still on the if, we are going to look at how can we add multiple actions, multiple statements in the then part and the else part. Because look at what is going to happen. So I just created some space there so that I can add some additional statements. And I'm going to write in here. So this is an additional statement to be carried out in this then part. So right line, open bracket, quotation mark. This is a second. This is the true section, or we can say the then section. So that we clear what is gonna appear. Now, here now, if I try to run this here, if I try to compile, so notice I typed it correctly. Everything was typed correctly. Right line, my open bracket, my quotation mark, my phrase, closing the quotation mark, closing the bracket. Everything is typed correctly. But if I compile, it's going to say semicolon expected. So it is expecting me to end this first statement here, because I basically typed two statements here. And the semicolon, the purpose of it is to tell the system simply that this is where the statements start from and this is where it is ending. So whenever you type a statement, like for instance, right line, it looks for that semicolon to know that is the end of that one statement. So because I now have two statements here, the two can't just be together without a semicolon, because it needs that starting point and that ending point. So I must type semicolons now at the end of each one of them. However, if I go and compile, it's now going to give me another error. Statement expected. Basically what is happening now, if you notice, it appeared at this else here. It's expecting a statement. What statement? It is expecting this if statement. So what basically happened here is that the semicolon now broke the connection between the if and this else. This else here can no longer see this if, all because of me typing in these two semicolons here. How do we know that? Well, simply if I delete this here and go back to one statement and compile, notice it compiles successfully. So those semicolons and that additional statement, even if I had simply typed a semicolon here and I compile, notice I get the same error. statement expected, because this semicolon here is breaking the connection. It was placed there incorrectly. So what we're getting at is, how can I type multiple statements in this then section without it affecting the else? You do that by starting with the word begin. Right after the then keyword, you are going to type the word begin. That begin is going to indicate that is the starting point of how much ever statements that will appear in the then section. So it's going to be then and the word begin to indicate the starting point of that then section. So now we can type our multiple statements with our semicolon. And the same thing, well, at the end, we have to put the word end. So wherever we have a begin, we must also put the word end to indicate that's the ending point. So for this then section here, all of these statements are part of the then section. Similarly for the else begin, and the same pattern I'm going to apply. This is the else section, semicolon, and then the word end to indicate as the end of the else statement. So this is our if statement here. Because we wanted to type multiple statements in the then and the else, we needed to add the additional two statements of begin and end. So now if we compile, notice it says compile successful. And if I run, enter the first number, 40, 50, 30, the result is 120. The result is greater than 100. I notice my next statement. This is the then section. So if I type it less than now, the result is 45. The result is not greater than 100. This is the else section. So create this here. Add multiple statements. Let me know if you get it to work. Stephanie, you got it to work? Okay. I was wondering what was the yes, sir, and then I realized.
Work, sir.
Great. Do, 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 do.
So it worked for me.
Great. So just Lena.
Starts telling me some line too long.
Line too long. Check and see if you accidentally use a curly bracket instead of a normal bracket.
No.
Check and make sure you closed all your brackets, closed all your quotation mark. You type begin, you type end. Something you don't type exactly as you see it on the screen. Something you left open. That's why it's saying line too long. Maybe you accidentally deleted a bracket somewhere.
Say at the end of end at then begin it's supposed to be a semicolon.
Where?
You see where then begin is?
Uh-huh.
The end part, END at the bottom, is supposed to get a semicolon.
No, if you put a semicolon, it's gonna break the
And then they highlighted those.
good. So you type it exactly as you see it on my screen. You're only placing semicolon with these two right line here. Not with the begin, not with the end. Only with the right line statement you're putting else semicolon.
They keep telling me the semicolon is expected.
Then that means you didn't you sure you type begin and end?
Yeah.
Alright, share screen, let me see what's going on. I'm not seeing anything. You might have to do full share the entire screen. Mhm. So let's see what's happening. All right, so if result is greater than 100, then begin. You have a full stop there. You can't put a full stop.
Where?
End full stop is for the complete end of the program. Click hide. Good, now compile. Delete that other end full stop. Compile again. Good, run. Good, that's it. So remember end followed by a full stop. That's for the complete end of your program. It's just an end you needed. All right, good. So that's how we type or we add multiple statements in our then and else part of our if function. Any questions? Excuse me. Any questions from anybody? All right, moving on. So now we're going to look at how to add our loops. So we just wrapped up how to add our if function, how to add our if statement, and how to make use of it. So now we're going to add our loops, our while loop, for loop, repeat loop. So we're basically going to follow the pattern that we're seeing here. And the same thing we would have learned. So Basically, we want to loop the entire program. So we're going to practice looping the entire program. So that means we have to go to the top of the program, and that is going to be just before or just after initializing the variable. So just after initializing, or you can say just before right line, please enter the first number. We're going to start our loop. So we're going to type while, but we need a variable first. So we're going to scroll back up, and we're going to create a variable called count. So count is like the most common variable you would use to count literally how many times you run a loop for. So we're going to declare count as integer. Please do that now. Like you see, I'm doing in the top here. Ensure you type it correctly as you see in it. Count, colon, integer, semicolon. Ensure you spell it correctly. So we're we're declaring count as an integer. We also need to initialize it so that it doesn't get any random value, any garbage value. So we can say count. We're going to go to the initializing part also, where we have these numbers here. So count, colon, equal 0, semicolon. So we declared count as integer, and we are initializing it as a 0. Let me know when you guys finish typing that before I move ahead.
Yes, sir.
Great.
Person.
All right. Good. Stephanie? Good. So we can also do compile. Remove the, if you had type while, like how I typed while, remove while, compile, and you should see compile successful. That way we can ensure that our declaration and initializing was done correctly. So compile, and ensure you are seeing compile successful. If you're not, let me know. Otherwise, let's move ahead. So nobody's indicating anything, so that means you would have done that part correctly. So now we're going to add a while keyword. So while, open brackets. So notice we're following this pattern here. While variable, while a test, do, and we notice we have begin and end. Indicate as the starting point of the loop and the ending point of the loop. So we're going to follow that pattern. Now while count is less than 10, so that means we're going to run it for 10 times, close bracket, do, then the next line, begin. So type this here, while, open bracket, count is less than 10, close bracket, do, in the next line, begin. So this is the starting point of our loop. Now after that, we need our update. So if you guys can remember when we were covering loops, all loops basically had 4 parts. The update was one of them. So count equal count plus 1. This is the structure as to how we update a variable. We basically add 1 to that variable, keep adding 1 to that variable, and store that value back into that variable. So this is basically going to be 0 plus 1, and 1 gets stored in the count. And when the loop repeats itself, it's going to be 1 plus 1, which is going to give us 2, and that gets stored inside of count. What we can also do to see it, we can do right line, open quotation, count equal. So we can see the value of count as we're running our loop. Close quotation, comma, then the variable count, close bracket, semicolon. So type this here. Let me, so this is supposed to be colon equal to, and let me just type this here. I'll scroll back up just now so you can see it. Just want to compile and make sure everything is okay. Good, compile successful. Good. So you type in this here, what I've highlighted here. Remember, you're typing it before. Please enter the first number. Count, open bracket. Sorry, while, open bracket. Count is less than 10, close brackets. Followed by the word do. All of that is part of the structure. Then you have the keyword begin to indicate as the starting point of the loop. We have our update next, which is count colon equal to count plus 1 semicolon. And then we are going to output that variable, right line, count equal count, basically, to indicate what value that variable has so that we can see it as it increments. So let me know when you're finished typing this here. All right, good.
Sir.
All right. Good. Now, you're going to go to the end. Just before the end with the period, you're going to type end semicolon, because that's where we want our loop to end. At the complete end of the program, it has to be just before end with a period. So you type end semicolon. So this end with a semicolon is going to link to this begin at the top here to indicate that's the starting and that's the ending point. So when you're finished, compile. Let me know if you get compile successful.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Good. Good, good. So now we run the program. So you can look at mine first. So notice it says count equal 1. So let me stop the program, look back at the code. So remember we initialize it with 0. And then we say while count is less than 10, begin the loop. But notice before we output the variable, we were incrementing the variable. So that 0 was added to that 1. So notice the outputs, we have 1. So count equal 1. Please enter the first number, 30. Please enter the second number, 30. Third number, 30. The result is 30. The result is not greater than 100. This is the else section. And notice count equal 2. And we started back the program. So run yours. Let me know if you get it to work, if your loop is working.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Good. So remember, what I'm showing you is similar to what I showed you in the pseudocode, in that for your SBA, you're simply using the same structure. How I showed you the structure of creating something, but you substitute it for your instruction. But this is basically the same pattern you're going to follow for some parts of your SBA. Because for your program, you must run it 10 times, at least 10 times. And this is simply me showing you how to create a loop to run 10 times. Good. Now what I want you to do, what we're going to do next, is basically format this jumble up part here. So, but instead of outputting a line of space, we want something to indicate that this is the end of one part of the loop and this is the starting point of another part of the loop. So we are going to scroll down in our code and we're going to go to just after the end for the if statement, for the else. We're going to go after that, give yourself some space. So after this end here, we are going to copy the code that gives us a line of space. We're going to put that first and then copy it again. So you're going to have it 2 times. What we're going to do inside of the last one, we are going to put some asterisks inside of it. So with this now, a bunch of asterisks will appear on the screen, functioning like a line to separate one part of the program from the other. So you're adding these 2 lines of code after the else statement, just before the end with a semicolon. Let me know when you finish typing that. So this is what you're adding. Y'all finish typing those 2 code?
Yes,
When
sir.
finished, can I compile it?
Yeah, you can compile and see if it is working.
It's in semicolon expected.
Let me see. Oh, well, now it is expecting a semicolon. It's because we didn't have any statements before, so just put a semicolon at the end and compile, and you get compile successful. It's because it didn't have any statements after it. So basically, it should look like this here now. Compile, it should run
Yes.
success. Good, good. Erica and Amlina, y'all getting through?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. Now we run it. So notice count equal 1, enter the first number, 40, second number, 40, third number, 40. The result is 120. The result is greater than 100. The result, this is the then section. And notice a line. We get a space, a line appearing across the screen, and then we have count equal 2, enter the first number. So we have basically some presentation, some formatting of our output, so we can see different sections of the loop. But basically, we just implemented a loop, so we can continue adding numbers. We can notice it's gonna keep running like that. 3 count is equal to 3. We keep adding numbers. Count is equal to 4. We keep adding numbers. Count is equal to 5. Keep adding numbers. Count is equal to 6. Keep adding numbers. Count is equal to 7. Count is equal to 8. Count is equal to 9. And what's going to happen now when I press enter? Count is equal to 10. And it's still waiting for input. So run it again. What's going to happen now when I press enter? Notice the program ended. At the bottom it says end of program reached. So it went all the way up to 10 because that is what I set it to. Once count is less than 10, then do the following. But the reason why we're seeing 10 is because remember it gets updated afterward. So that's why we saw that 10 and the program still would have run. Good. Any questions? Any issues? So remember, that's how you would implement the while loop if you're interested in putting the while loop in your program. Now here's a tip that you can use for making your program what is called dynamic. This is what we call a static program. Static in that you are already setting it to run 10 times. So it's static in that nature. It's already programmed to run 10 times. But a dynamic program now is when you tell it how many times to run the program for, how many times to run the loop for. So what we can do, we can keep this initialization, but what we're going to do, we are going to make some space before while. So before while, make some space, and we're going to type right line, open bracket, single quotation mark, please enter how many times you would like to run the loop. A bit lengthy, could have shortened it. Please enter how many times you would like to run the loop. So we're making a prompt, semicolon. Then in the next line, we're going to take an input and we're going to store it in that. Actually, we need to create another variable. So to get it to do what I want it to do. So we need to scroll up to our declaration. And we can name this variable loop, colon, and we're gonna declare it as an integer also. But we won't need to initialize it because we are going to be putting a value into it, so we don't need to initialize it. So just declare your loop variable, loop colon integer. You're declaring that variable loop. So once you've completed that, go back to your right line. Please enter how many times you would like to run the loop. And just underneath that, we are going to take a read line, open brackets, and we're going to store it into that variable loop. So basically what's going to happen here is that we're going to ask the person to enter how many times they want to run the loop for, and the person enters the value, whether it's 5, 10, 100, and it gets stored into this variable called loop. So now, in the while test, it's not going to be if count is less than 10. It's now going to be if count is less than the variable loop. So imagine that variable loop now being a value the person entered. So is count less than 100? Is count less than 1,000? How much ever the person enter, and it gets stored in that variable loop. Everything else is going to remain the same. There's something I was supposed to do, but I can't remember. So remember, you're declaring the variable loop as integer, loop colon, integer, semicolon. Oh, now remember. A line of space, because it's going to be jumbled up. So right after the read line, put a line of space. So this is what you're adding. You're declaring loop as integer, and you're also typing this here just before this here, just before at the beginning. Right line, please enter how many times you would like to run the loop. Read line into loop. Then we have a line of space. And then for the while loop, we are testing to see if count is less than the value we enter into the variable called loop. And then it's going to run for that particular amount of time. So let me compile. Compile successful. I don't have any issues. So let me know if you guys compiled and everything is okay.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Great. One more person.
Yes, sir.
All right, good. So now we are going to run. So notice we now have, please enter how many times you would like to run the loop. So I'm going to enter 5. So we're going to cut it short. 5. And then we have count equal 1. So I'm going to enter the number so we can go through it. So notice count equal 2. So we're at a second loop. Now we have count equal 3. We are at the third loop. Count equal 4. We are at our fourth loop. Count equal 5. We are at our final loop. When I press enter here, notice it says end of program reached. So this is what we call a dynamic program. You're entering basically how many times you want it to run for. Any questions on it? Did you guys get it to work though?
Sir, I put 5 and it still went on harder than 5.
Do you have, check back and ensure you have this part here typed correctly, what I highlighted. Erica, you got yours to work?
Sir, it went on to longer than 5.
All right, check back and make sure you have typed this part here correctly as I have highlighted. Remember, you gotta modify the while. While count is less than loop. Oceana, yours worked?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. Yes, Amelina. Stephanie, yours worked? All right, so it's just Amelina and Erica.
It still went on.
Still? All right, share screen. Let me see what's happening. All right, so um, open the stop it and open the code. Click on program at the top left. Click on program, so you can see it much wider. Good. Scroll up. Good. You see it. Scroll back down. See where you have while. I told you you still have count less than 10. It's supposed to be count less than loop. Good. So now you have right line. Enter how many times you'd like to run the program. You read it into loop. You have your line of space. And now you're going to test if count is less than loop. Compile. Run. Good. Now see how many times you're going to run for. Well, you type 23, so now you got to type it 23 times. Still stop the program. Good. Run it again. Type 2 this time. Or 3, anything. Good. So you can run for 3 times now. Good. So your second loop, third loop. So when you press enter, the last one, you can end. Good. So that's it there. Erica, you got yours fixed? Or the same problem?
Sir, got it fixed.
Good. So that was the issue there. Good. Any questions from anybody? All right, so that is how you implement what is called a dynamic loop. You're basically asking the person how many times to run the loop for. So that's the pattern there. You basically use a variable to accept the input, and then you test that particular variable. All right, let's see what else we got to cover, because we're almost at the end of creating programs. So we're gonna just, I think for loop is the last one, and that's gonna be the end of creating programs. And it's just for you guys now to complete your entire SBA. Good. So the last thing we're gonna cover today is the for loop. So if you don't want to use the while loop, you can use the for loop. Where is it? For. Why didn't they show repeat? Not sure why. But repeat is going to basically be repeat until. Might see if I send a video on that. Let's see now. So I don't. So just do what I'm about to do. Click on File. Click on Save. So that's going to save this program that you're currently working on. So then click on File again. And then you're going to go to Save Program As. Everybody here?
Sir, can you go back, please?
All right, so you're going to click on File, and you're going to click Save Program, because you want to save what you currently would have done. So select Save Program. You're saving what you currently would have done. Then you go back to File again, and you're going to select Save Program As. What we're basically going to do is create a duplicate of this file. So select Save Program As, and this box will pop up. Tell me when you guys are here.
Yes, sir.
The rest of you here? So from this file, Save Program As. Lena, Oceana, Stephanie, y'all here?
Yes, sir.
Oceana?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Good. So now select desktop because you want to save the file to the desktop or wherever you want to save it. But if you save it to the desktop, you might find it back easier. So select desktop and where you see file name, just type in for loop. Because we want to create a duplicate of the file. We don't want to modify what we were currently working on. We want to create a whole other program so that we can implement the for loop. So we're going to name that for loop and we're going to select save. And that should create a whole different program. It's going to look the same, but you just created a whole different program. So let me know when you guys finish there. Nothing's going to change or anything. But once you did that, it's going to create a whole different program. If you look at the top, you're going to say easy Pascal for loop. Because that's the file you're currently working on. So remember it's file, save as, go to your desktop, type in for loop and select save. Let me know when you finish with that.
Finish, sir.
All right. The rest of you finish. Shouldn't be that difficult.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, good. So if you actually go to your desktop now, or wherever you had your files, you can notice you have two files now. Program example, the one we already created. So this is going to have a while loop. And now we're going to modify this for loop file. Good. So what we need to do now, we need to delete the for loop we created. So look for while count less than loop do begin. That's where you're deleting. And also the count. So you're basically deleting this here, what I highlighted there. While count less than loop do begin. Count equal count plus 1, right line count equal count, all of that you're deleting because you don't need an update for the for loop. So delete that. So your program should look back. You can also delete, please enter how many times you want to run the loop for. We can implement that back later. We're just looking to create a simple for loop for now. So basically delete everything you would have added for the for loop. So it should only be count equals 0 and then you have right line, please enter the first number. Everything in between you delete. And remember also to go till to the bottom and delete that. You can leave it because you're still going to need it. So you don't need to delete that end. You're actually going to use it. So in the space now, we're going to type 4 and we're going to use the variable count. 4 count colon equal 1 to 10 do. Let's see. Do we need a begin? Let's see if it needs a begin. It's not indicating it there. Compile successful. Let me see if it's gonna run first. Enter the first number. The result is enter the second. Good. So this is gonna work. Let me see if you don't type in begin, what's gonna happen. Pretty sure it won't work. Yeah, statement expected. Now if I delete this here, compile successful. Good. See, it's running it basically did this 10 times because it doesn't have a begin and an end. So you need that begin and end. So end semicolon at the very end. And just after 4 counts equal 1 to 10, we put the word begin. So this is our for loop here. So let's put this here for now. For count equal 1 to 10, begin. And keep your end semicolon at the bottom. Compile, and you should not have any issues once you would have deleted correctly what I told you. All right, everybody here? Is it working?
Yes, sir.
Did it work for the rest of you?
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yes, sir.
All right. Good. Now, once again, this is it being static. So let's make it dynamic. So we're going to put back the same thing we had before. Right line, open brackets, quotation mark. Please enter how many times to run the loop. Quotation mark, close bracket, semicolon. And then we have to read line that into the variable loop. So we're using back that same variable, semicolon, right line to get our line of space. So type all of that. And instead of it being 1 to 10, it's going to be 1 to loop. So create this here. So we're asking the person once again to enter how many times to run the loop. Store it into the variable loop, create a line of space, and then we are going to start our loop by testing if count, from counting from 1 to whatever value the person would have entered into loop. And we're also gonna add is we're gonna add back that same count output right after begin. We want it inside of the loop this time. So we're gonna right line so we can see the value of count. Count equal close quotation, comma, count, close bracket, semicolon. So type this here so that we can see the value of count as the loop increments. Let me compile one time and see if I have any issues. Compile successful. So you shouldn't have any issues once you typed all of that correctly. Let me know when you're finished.
Yes, sir.
All right. You can run it in the meantime. The rest of you getting through?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. So we run it. Please enter how many times to run the loop. So we're going to say 4 times or how much of a time you want to test yours with. So we can see count equal 1, enter the number, count equal 2, enter the number again, count equal 3, enter the number again, count equal 4, and after I finish entering here, it should end the program. End of program reached. So I just run the program there dynamically for 4 times. Everybody got theirs to work?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, Ameline and Stephanie, did you guys did your
Yes, sir.
work?
Yes, sir.
All right, great, great, good. So that's basically it. That's everything you need to know. Very simple statements. We don't need anything too complicated. So if following these same patterns that we created in the program, you create a title for your program, you declare your variables, you initialize your variables, you create your read line, your prompt, your write line, your output, and so on. So remember, this is the pattern of prompt. You have to write line, give the person an instruction, and then you read line the input. If you're doing a calculation, it's basically creating a formula. If you're doing an if, it's if followed by a test, followed by the then keyword. If you have multiple statements, put it into begin and end, followed by else, and same pattern. And you basically surround everything by a loop. Whether it's the for loop, whether it's the while loop, whichever loop you want. Any questions? All right, so please remember to finalize your SBA. Please also add comments to your program when you're working on your program, like how I added comments throughout the program. For the program, at the very beginning, you need to add name of creator, date created, and what is the purpose of the program. So that needs to be at the very top here. Like how I have these comments at the top here. You need name. What did I say? Name, candidate number. Basically, the video I sent the other day, you need to add your candidate number to all your documents. So name, candidate number, date created, whatever date you started the program or finished the program, whatever, and what's the purpose of the program. So all that in your comments. And then you add additional comments throughout the program, like how I added additional comments. Any questions before we close? All right, no questions. That brings us to the end of today's class. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye, sir.
Goodbye.